Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 80th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our discussion panels twice monthly to demonstrate that open-minded civil discussions will lead to better understanding of almost any topic by almost everyone. Today our panel will discuss common American values. What are they? What do they mean? Are they unique? And do they change over time? Today's panel, beginning on my left, is Jerry Ritzman, chairman of the board of Ritzman Pharmacies, which began as one pharmacy in Wadsworth, Ohio many years ago and is now 25 pharmacies in 9 counties. Thought I'd share that. On his left is Patty Haskins, retired math teacher and member of the Wadsworth City Council. On her left is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. And on his left is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, a retired senior research chemist. Jerry, most Americans would have some difficulty providing a list of American values. Most of us, if we think about it at all, think that all civilized human beings value the same things. Are Americans unique? Do we have values that are not universal in nature?
Well, I would think that we do have values that are different than individuals in other cultures or other countries and so forth. And in thinking about this values question, it's actually something I've been thinking about for some time. And I think my observation is that we can somewhat determine what the values are in our cultures by observing individuals or groups of people or the people in the culture, what their behaviors are and what they expend their energy and time on pursuing. And I think that we have now in the United States the big 3 of things that people value. Because if I look at what is being promoted to the public and what the public is pursuing, I would have to judge that these are probably the big 3 in the U.S. And number 1 is financial security. People are pursuing financial security through employment, through education, through trying to secure their retirement, financial security. They're after that. They want that. So they must value that.
The signs are all over the place.
It's every place. So that's, I think, one big thing is financial security is one of the things that they value. So we would have to say that's a value. The other thing is security in your health or having good health. Now, what people are willing to do for that will vary. Some people just want fixed. Some people will spend energy trying to maintain their health. But if we look at the amount of our gross domestic product that we spend on health care, approaching 20%, I would think that our society values health care. And all the signs are out there of that. The third thing that I think that individuals value is being occupied or being entertained, whether that be through television, movies, sports, or whatever. Individuals spend a lot of effort to be entertained or to be able to follow some type of sporting event or some type of thing. So those are the big 3. And I do not exclude myself from those, please. I'm not looking to say that it's everybody else and not me. I have to include myself in that. Those are my observations on what the big 3 are of our values.
And it sounds like they might be universal in nature.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, but the thing is that most of those, I believe, are inward focused on the individual. They focus on me, on what I get out of it, what I want. And so we become more and more inward focused on the things that we value. And what's the ultimate outcome of that? I don't know.
Well, I have to admit, you took that conversation in a different direction than I expected. What about you, Patty? What are your thoughts?
I think there definitely are values that are just distinctly American. One of which I think would be our penchant for change. We automatically think that progress is automatically good and change is always good. However, I think, in other countries and in the rest of parts of the world, tradition takes more importance. And I personally think it's kind of a mix of the two, that you have, change can be good, but change for change's sake is not. And that we need to look at tradition in the past so that we don't make the same mistakes that we made in the past and actually know how we arrive at certain situations. Another interesting thing I value, I think, of all Americans is equality. We all, as a woman, I think that all people are equal no matter what their gender, race, and so forth. However, in other countries, there is more of a hierarchy in which, so people aren't equal. I think between the two, though, is the fact that when we say we're all equal, that means that you don't necessarily listen to those that are in charge. We tended, I think, in the past, now, are tending to lose our respect for those in positions that are above us, whether it be your boss, whether it be the priest at your church, whether it be the teacher in your school, whether it be the president.
And you think that our orientation toward equality is responsible?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is because of that.
Disrespecting authority?
Exactly, because sometimes with that feeling of equality is I am as good as you are, so I don't have to listen to you. Now, I think you have to kind of temper the two together. It's to look at someone and think that their job is beneath you, I think is wrong. And just because they're not doing the same job you are, or the fact that they were not educated in the same way you were, totally incorrect. However, in certain positions, you have to respect the right of that person in charge to make certain decisions and so forth. And we tend, and again, I've seen this even, for example, as a teacher, the respect that teachers receive from students, quite a bit different. The respect, the respect that teachers get in a society now has quite changed. Another one is competition and free enterprise. We all feel that competition is good, and I can think of many examples where competition is good. We in Wadsworth benefit from the fact that we have our own cable system, and it competes with Time Warner, and because of that, our rates are lower than anywhere around us, and you can check that out and find that competition is good. But competition isn't always the best way to solve problems or produce the best product. Sometimes cooperation, which is more a value, I think, in other countries, produces a better product when different companies get together and decide, okay, you can do this, and work together, as opposed to constantly competing against one another.
One of the things I think about on that point, the most startling example, I believe, is the quality of American automobiles now compared to the 50s because of the foreign competition, particularly Japanese. Automobiles are so much better now. I have a 21-year-old Japanese car that is not a whole lot different than it was the day I bought it. And the cars that I bought in the past were good for about 5 years. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I go back to the 50s. I think products that are made now, they're made to last 2 years, no matter what it is, whether it's a car, whether it's a refrigerator. Yeah. And it used to be you bought that item and you had it for 20 years. Well, and, that no longer exists. There's others that, you can deal with your personal control over the environment. Americans feel that we can control everything. We are bright, we are smart, we're intelligent, we have all of the new sciences involved, and that we have control over our environment. And other nations look at the fact, and I think there are, fate is involved, and there are some things that you cannot control. I mean, can you truly control the weather? Is that something that is in the grasp of your control? Maybe there are some things you can do to make, for example, when you talk about climate change, there are some things you could do so that climate change is not worse and that the weather does not become worse. But there are some things that basically I don't have any control if it rains tomorrow or tonight. And just because I'm an American, I can't fix it. So.
Bryan, can you fix it?
Nope. I agree with everything that's been said. Unfortunately, Jerry's observation sort of lends ourselves to a society that has now become more me-centered. A sense of community just isn't there anymore. We do have a sense of community, I believe, here in Wadsworth. I think when you get into more urban areas, you lose that sense of community. You lose a sense of being part of a social fabric, and you start seeing breakdowns in that, and that's unfortunate. I think there's a cure for that, but I don't know if everybody wants to take that medicine. We're a very affluent society. The feeling is that we can just throw money at a problem and we can solve it. I think of the people that came out of the Great Depression. I think of the people that came out of World War I and World War II, where people had to sacrifice. My father and mother would tell stories about going to the store and not being able to buy a pack of gum because it was rationed, and not being able to put a new set of tires on your car because they were rationed. I think today there'd be a lot of people that would melt down. They would not be able to figure out how to survive in that particular environment. Now, I'm not saying we need a depression, but I think the affluence that we are now experiencing lends to these particular observations that people are very selfish. Charitable giving is down, volunteerism is down nationwide. Most service-oriented clubs are struggling for members because people just don't see a need. They're worried about themselves. A lot of folks don't even know their own neighbors. And I think we've drifted from what America really was about, and that was everybody was in this together. And it was sort of the saying, I could pick on my brother, but the minute you picked on my brother, you had everybody in the family that you had to worry about. I don't see that anymore, and that's unfortunate. So I think with the affluence and the availability of all the programs that are out there has really created a crippling effect on the upcoming generations, because they feel like someone else is going to solve their problems. This notion that we can have experts run our country, I think we've just seen part of the result of that with the Brexit. Britain has now voted to leave the EU, and one of the reasons was that they didn't feel that 4 people in Brussels could run their country. The EU, the dictates that they were coming out with really upset the people over there. One of them was the toasters that they were using, because they were energy inefficient, and they saved the toasters, and the British loved their toast and their tea, and they were saying that these pots that they were using were inefficient, and they were going to outlaw them. Now, I think when government gets into that sort of micromanaging, you're going to have problems. And I think you'd have problems here in the United States if someone says, Patty, I'm sorry, but that blow dryer you're using, or the makeup you're wearing, or the car that you're driving, you can't drive that anymore. So the sense of individualism is still strong. We see it every now and again, and I think that's what's made America great. Not only are we're concerned about others, but we want others to succeed just as well as us. And I think we're not seeing that as much. It's more of a dog-eat-dog environment, which I don't think in the long run helps anybody.
So your feeling is that our values do change over time?
For the good and for the bad. And I think we're sort of on a course where our values really aren't changing for the better. I think we really need to step back and really study out and put in place some things that will actually put us on a better course.
Okay. Ron, what are your thoughts?
There's a number of threads going here that they're really pretty fascinating. Jerry's comment of financial security and Bryan's about community and helping others. I'd like to think about a particular instance that's concerned me over the years where I think we might be a little bit different than foreign countries, and that is welfare. How we take care of those less fortunate among us. Now, we're all here professed Christians, so we have this kind of moral compulsion that we should help others less fortunate than us, stemming from some of those beliefs. But we're not a welfare state, unlike places like Sweden. We don't believe in cradle to the grave. However, welfare pretty much started in this country during the Great Depression under Franklin Roosevelt, and a way of getting us out of that, helping the various government programs to put people to work. Again, with a sense of dignity. I'm thinking of the CCC camps, for example, the Civilian Conservation Corps, where went out to build roads and develop state parks. It gave the young men a small wage, at which some of it had to be sent home. The bulk of it had to be sent home to the families. So that's all good. And it wasn't until the 1990s that Congress decided to take some of that away from the federal government and bring it back to the states. And there was a whole welfare reform issue that President Clinton signed off on in the early 1990s. Yeah. And since then, I think there's been an increasing concern, particularly, and I think welfare seems to be a kind of hot button item among both liberals and conservatives. And so you say something like this, someone will say, oh, well, these people are living off the rest of us, they're sponging on us, and they're getting so many benefits they don't want to go to work. That's not strictly true, I don't think. I noticed, I did a little research in Ohio, and Ohio is starting to send up, it's through Job and Family Services, there's a program underway called Ohio Works First, in which they're going to try to set up standards where folks who get welfare will have to be looking for work and have to apply on a regular basis, have to report back that they're looking for jobs. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. There's a whole list of things here I found of what has been a rule-driven welfare system will now be a performance outcome system.
Okay, and this would tie into our value of having a work ethic.
Having a work ethic, and there's a group called the Cato Institute that did a study, and they said, well, here in Ohio, my goodness, someone makes the equivalent of about $12 an hour, which is better than minimum wage.
On welfare.
That's been debunked.
On welfare, you mean?
On welfare. Well, that's been debunked somewhat, and it's not really a sweet deal. Someone pointed out that about 133,000 people in Ohio receive a cash assistance program. That's 1.2% of the population. And 108,000 of those are children. So they're not going to go to work. The average benefit per month in someone on this is $184. That's hardly a sweet deal. It's helpful, but it's not a sweet deal. 40% of the food stamp recipients are children. So you have the thing where you have our government in Ohio wants to cut back on the food stamp program. Who's that hurting? How is it hurting? And I think the arguments for or against this kind of thing is about this work ethic, I think, in my observation, falls in pretty much conservative liberal kind of basis. Conservatives want to, well, let's not go overboard on providing these things. Let's strengthen the requirements to get back to work. Liberals will say, well, yeah, let's cut a little more slack here. Some folks have mental health issues that prevent them holding full-time jobs, be it anxiety or bipolar or some other sort of situation where it's hard for a person to maintain. So I think there's a liberal conservative problem here going on that we see, and we have to combat that. I think we have to try to meet in the middle to some extent, and I think it is the work ethic.
I think part of the solution is that instead of having a central, planning government that does a poor job of it, give a block grant to the Salvation Army, give a block grant to the United Way, give a block grant to local churches that really have their finger on the pulse of the poverty in their community, and let them, with certain guidelines, help people. I mean, when you see the line of people and the good that the Salvation Army does, when they hand out hundreds of backpacks and the need that they have, I think they're better equipped than a bureaucrat, whether they're in Washington, D.C. or in Columbus, to administer a program like that. And I think that's where the problems come in. I believe the farther you send your money away, the less control you have, and the less outcome that you think is effective. So,
I think that's an interesting suggestion. I think that does work to some extent.
It works in Europe because I think Germany does it.
Germany does it.
I think Germany does a lot. They also tax their people 7 or 8% to support their churches. You know, so yeah, you can't. It's hard to get around that over there. But so they see that, and they're handling that issue in a much different way. And I think we should be open to things like that. But all of a sudden we have bureaucrats saying, "Oh no, when we give that up, we give up power."
There have been a lot of studies over time that indicate that altruism used to be a very big component of our culture, and that when government began to take responsibility for human needs, altruism began to disappear. I didn't realize, as you said, that even it's continuing to decline. I would have guessed the opposite.
It's not dead, though. And I have a couple of examples on that, really. Basing from my experiences in Danbury, Connecticut. There's a fairly large homeless population in the city of Danbury. It's a small city. It's a little bigger than Barberton, smaller than Akron. And there was a core of homeless, and these folks would go around from church to church to church and get their handouts. Finally, the churches wised up to this, and all the churches donated to Salvation Army, sent folks to the Salvation Army to administer that. Another program that I was involved in, I was on the board of directors for a while, was a program house. It was called Amos House, based on a quotation from the prophet Amos, where one should build straight and true and use a plumb line to determine so that you have a solid foundation of what you're building. And a house was developed. There were 5 churches went together. And a house was developed to take care of families, to serve as a transitional program to get permanent housing. And it was started in 1989. The house was built. And it's devolved a little bit. It used to be there. Individual rooms hold 2 people each, communal kitchen, shared bathrooms, programs to help people with this transitional area. It's devolved now to where, since families are larger than perhaps are expected, they can handle about 6 families. And since that, I looked it up. There's been 175 families have been helped to go from to permanent housing by this program. But you can't do it all. Individuals and churches can't do it all.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
You need some government help there. We need all of us joining in.
Well,
whether altruism is falling or not, I don't know. But
if for nothing else, for some stability, so that they have that income from that unemployment check. You know, just to put in a plug for altruism, I went yesterday to we had a groundbreaking for our second house being built in Wadsworth for Habitat for Humanity. Fantastic project. They are presently building 2 homes, one at 660 Broad and one at 575 Broad Street. And they need volunteers. So anyone out in our audience who is feeling altruistic, they meet every Saturday.
Hammer, they want you.
Every Saturday from 9 to 5, and they're meeting this Saturday at 575 Broad Street.
They don't work on the house during the week, just on the weekend?
It's on Saturdays.
Just on Saturdays.
Saturdays. So many of the people have other jobs. They can't get out there all day.
Yeah.
And you know, the model of Habitat for Humanity is that the people that are going to live there have sweat equity.
Yes.
And that's that ownership component.
Yeah.
That they're there swinging the hammer.
Exactly.
They're doing some things because when they move in, it's their house. And they respect it much more than a rental. You know, there's no landlord anymore, so I would agree. You know, get out there, help them.
To me, I can tell you about that.
Yeah, well. So, you know, I think we really, if we get back to some of those core values that our parents and our grandparents espoused, helping your neighbor, being neighborly, all that kind of stuff, I think it would go a long way. Now it's more, You know, how does it affect me?
I think we've seen, though, that values can and do change over time.
Yes.
They'll respond to need and so forth. I'm thinking, well, Bryan mentioned rationing during World War II. I'm old enough to remember meat coupons and gas stamps and things like that. But that was we were more patriotic then. It was a my country, right or wrong kind of an attitude, which changed in the early '60s with the war in Vietnam, and we began to, I would like to think, as Americans began to take more responsibility for what our politicians were doing. But it does change over time, and that there was a radical change during the '30s. We started doing things that we never dreamed of. Hoover was a very popular president because he would absolutely refuse any of the things that Roosevelt came up with over time. There's still people who think that Roosevelt was the devil himself for things, but
well, and there were folks. I can recall my one grandfather. He would never take anything at all without paying for it. If you take him to the store, to the grocery store, he'd give you $1 and help with the gas. You know? And it was important to him to do that. Yet the man would go scavenge metal and take it over to the junkyard and get a few cents.
You know, I think one value that has been with us since the beginning of our country is the one that was observed by de Tocqueville on his visit here from France, and that, which was a complete revelation and something foreign to him, was that you, no matter what station or part of town or where you were born, you could rise to a different position economically, socially, and so forth, which was totally foreign in Europe, and still, I think, has some of that effect in some of the European countries, that if you're in a certain social or economic class there, it's tough to get out of, where we value that very highly here.
Caste system.
okay.
Right.
Just wanted to end with a quote from Amy Tan, who was the author of Joy Luck Club. And she said, "I am an American, steeped in American values, but I know on an emotional level what it means to be of a Chinese culture." Thank you very much. Good conversation.